Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm really pleased to welcome back to the Innova.Buzz podcast today the one and only Mark Schaefer. Mark is a globally recognized author, speaker, and marketing futurist, and among his 14 or so published books is Marketing Rebellion, The Most Human Company Wins, also Audacious, How Humans Win in an AI World, and his new book is How AI Changes Your Customers, the marketing guide to humanity's next chapter. Mark, when I look back at our previous conversations, all the way back to episode 324, and then most recently in episode 661, I can hear the seeds of your new book. I think you're already analysing how we prevent the pandemic of dull and how we champion the logic of the human-centered brand, which is very close to my heart as well. So the new book, I think, in some ways it does feel entirely different. It's not just a marketing concept, it's a psychological framework in a way. And you've gathered the voices of 300 futurists and combined them with your own thinking, warning us that humanity's being rewired and that we risk what you call cognitive decline that we may not be able to come back from. So welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Mark. I'm really privileged to have you here for this critical conversation.
Yeah, it's a delight. And it's funny how you said you could sort of see the seeds in other books. I think if you read all my books in order, you could sort of see my mind like unveiling itself.
Yeah. Yeah, hindsight's wonderful, isn't it? We can kind of see this thing. Now, Mark, in some of your other interviews I've heard regarding the book, you've shared that powerful, life-changing story of how your mentor helped you rebel against a life defined by anxiety to one defined by joy. Now, to me, this book seems like the same kind of rebellion on a global scale. You're not just writing about marketing, you're fighting to prevent a specific negative future and negative impact. Now, as you analyze this new AI-driven psychology, what's the one feeling or human quality you're most desperately trying to prevent us losing, both our customers and ourselves?
I can always count on you to ask me questions I've never thought of before. Great question. Well, so the first time I tried ChatGPT, it was right after I had finished writing a book called Belonging to the Brand. And when I write a book, it's generally a 2-year effort, struggle, sacrifice. By the end of that process, Jürgen, I'm physically, mentally, and psychologically just spent. And so ChatGPT comes out. And of course, the first thing I want to do is test it with writing an essay from this new book that I just wrote. And it did a perfect job. And the feeling that I had was really dread. It was dread. It was anxiety. I was feeling a loss of purpose. If this thing can write like me, where do I belong? So I think that is the feeling, the emotion that I've been fighting back. And I think a lot of people are fighting back. And what I'm learning to do is really embrace AI as a way that we can be bigger and bolder and more creative and have a bigger impact on the world. So hopefully, I think the book is fair. I think it's balanced. Most people I talk to, when the subject is AI, they say, I'm excited and I'm terrified. And I think there's probably a little bit of both in the book.
Yeah. And I have to say that I certainly agree with those sentiments. I'm excited. I play with it every day almost. And at the same time, I'm terrified. And one of the things I always ask myself every time I do something with it, particularly if it's create something creative. I say, so for example, I write a lot of speeches, and I send my first draft to the AI and I say, can you make this flow better, or can you do, and I think, am I losing my ability then to actually go through my first draft and do that myself? But at the same time, sometimes it uncovers something that I probably wouldn't have picked up. I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have got to, even if I had have gone through that struggle process that you mentioned. And so I still revisit it and still use it for those things. But how can we ensure that we're not suffering that decline of, I call it a decline of cognitive ability. I'm sort of thinking, am I losing my cognitive ability slowly, or letting it erode slowly by abdicating to AI some of those things that I had to do myself before?
I answer that on two levels. First of all, I don't know if anybody really knows.
Hmm.
And I would love to be back on your show a year from now, and let's talk about that again to see how this evolves. I was just on a call right before I'm having this conversation with you, and there were these college students on the phone, the young people, and they were telling me how they are using AI literally to do everything, to respond to everything going on in their lives. And they talked about this feeling of wanting to reject it, that they want this backlash to happen where they can sort of free themselves from this. But where do you draw the line? Where is that line? Now, I do think there is one line that became clear to me. And this was perhaps one of my biggest learnings from researching and writing this book. And that is the essential quality of curiosity.
Hmm.
I think that is the curiosity, and also being able to live um, with without a fast answer. With being able to live with friction, I think is going to be an interesting quality. And the reason I say that is because you're a curious person like me, and I use AI to feed my intellect, to feed my soul, to explore, to learn. I go down these curious rabbit holes of something that interests me, and an AI platform can create like a little mini book for me to read about something I'm interested in. And I think that is going to be a very important life skill that will be part of this line of definition. I think if you just are a person, yeah, I can't hear you now. Your audio went out. Were you hearing an echo or something? Were you hearing an echo or something?
Yeah, I've got you back now. Something's happened at my end. Just back. Okay, keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're not a curious person and you just want the answer, doing the hard work that leads to wisdom, to internalizing knowledge, won't occur. And that's what we're seeing in the educational system. Many people uh, want to avoid the work. They're going to take the shortcut. They're just going to get the answer so they can get a grade on a test. And they're coming out of school not knowing anything. And I'm hearing this a lot. So I think this idea of being a curious person, that's going to, I think, be a line between the haves and the have-nots in this emerging AI world.
Yeah, I think curiosity, I mean, as you say, I've always been a curious person, but I'm finding ways to actually build on my curiosity more than perhaps I did before. So a couple of examples from my personal life. So we've just come back from a Japan trip holiday, and I've always been fascinated by Japan and their culture and lifestyle and history. And so normally in those trips, I would read up on all of those things as I did this time. And then during the trip, I'd kind of things would come up. Oh, okay, maybe that's where this happened. And then I'd have to research that and spend a lot of time. But a lot of it I wouldn't do. I'd sort of say, oh, I wonder why they do this. And then that would be the end of that thought because there'd be so much happening. Whereas this time, I actually set up a travel guide AI. And I put in the AI, I said, I planned the trip, the tour with AI. And I then said, okay, here's when we're going to be there and here's when we're going to be there. And I fed it some information on background of what interested me particularly. And then I said, now I want you to give me historical background, historical perspectives, cultural things of every place we go to. And each morning I asked it, okay, we're here, we're in Kyoto, for example, we're visiting these places, give me more information. And then I had a much deeper experience of that. And the same thing happened last week. I was with my daughter on a 5-day bike trip, and I thought I'll do the same on this bike trip. It was just along a rail trail, but it gave me all the history of this, what the rail carried in those days when they built it. It gave me some engineering background. And so the experience of the trip, which normally was just about, having a fun time with my daughter and a bit of physical exercise, was so much enhanced. And of course, it fed my curiosity. And I thought, well, that's a good way to use the AI, although you have to be careful about accuracy as well, because sometimes we thought, well, according to the AI, we should have arrived at our destination now, and we ended up riding another kilometre before we got there. So there is that.
That's fascinating. I love the way you use this in truly a curious way. And it also sort of hints at one of the real business considerations that I bring up in the new book. And that's this idea that we are increasingly relying on AI for decision making, and our level of trust in AI is increasing. So, I had a similar experience that I related in my book where, AI planned a trip to Paris for me. And it's just like you, I said, I like nature, I like history, I like art, I like music. Plan this trip. I'm going to be in Paris for 5 days, and it told me what to do and where to go. And, this was the coolest thing. Like I was going to the Louvre and it said, don't go to the main entrance. Go to this entrance that's by the train station. There's no crowds. I thought, wow. I mean, it's really cool. So, my level of trust is going up in AI, but there's this implication that it helped me decide where to go, what to do, what to see, what to eat. And I didn't see any advertising. I didn't see any branded content. I didn't see any reviews and testimonies. I just did what it told me to do, and it did a pretty great job.
Yeah, one of the things in those trip examples that I did reflect on, I thought, well, in Japan, we still had a few mishaps that turned into like adventures that were experiences and I think you talk about this in the book in the sense of business that, lived experience is different than just the AI saying, do this, do that, and you mechanically go through the process. So we still had that. But I was cognizant of if I overplanned this thing and if everything's right, then it's going to be like, well, that was almost a bland experience, but it wasn't. But it is a concern I have.
It's an interesting point you bring up, and I keep hearing this word in terms of humanity's role in our future as this idea of friction. Like you're saying, if AI just planned everything and I didn't have the mishaps that led to adventures, would it be bland? And I think it's the friction that sometimes makes life the most interesting. And I don't know. Again, we're going to have to get back together, my friend, in a year and say, okay, how did this really turn out?
Yeah.
I think it's changed. I think it's changing so fast. I think in a year we'll have a much better compass showing
Yeah.
us what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, certainly it's things are moving pretty quickly. So, yeah. Um, let's come back to business a little bit, and you say something interesting in the book that is kind of counterintuitive, and that's you take the statement your customers don't necessarily have a short attention span, but that your content might have a short interesting span, and it sort of reframes the idea that with AI we might even have a shorter attention span. So talk to us a little bit more about that, and I'm particularly interested in your model for creating binge-worthy content that has that long, interesting span.
I mean, I think if you just look at the data, or if you just look at our lives, we watch movies, we'll binge television shows,
Hmm.
we'll listen to music, we'll go to concerts. I'm not a gamer, but I know people will stay up all night playing games because they're fun and because they're interesting. And I think that's one of the things in the corporate world that we've contained ourselves. We've put ourselves in a box, and there's almost like this scaffolding that's holding dull in place. We're boring because we want to get it approved by the legal department, or we're boring is because we don't want to upset our boss, or we're boring because the whole industry is boring, and it's always been boring. And that's what's kind of accepted. And so much of this pandemic of dull that most industries are in, it's created by fear. It's this fear. Now, some businesses are regulated, and you're sort of
Hmm.
dictated what you can do and what you can say. And if there are legal constraints of what you can do and say, you should do that, because my first rule of marketing is don't go to jail. But beyond that, I think it's really uh, the look. What keeps our attention? What keeps our attention is art, right? It's music, and it's a book, and it's an amazing game that makes our senses come alive. And the implication is that our business content, it has to approach the level of art. Now, that's sort of a weird thing that people haven't thought of before, but AI, in many ways, is contributing to this pandemic of dull. It's contributing to this flood of content, and it sort of demands for us to stand out. We've got to add this human connection. We've got to have the courage to add our human story. We have to have some bravery around the risk we're willing to take, or we're going to be ignorable.
Hmm. Yeah, that's I think that's a really important point, and this whole idea of that human connection is something that I'm certainly very passionate about, because I sort of hark back to the days when email marketing first came out, and I thought, well, the standard emails that are starting to come in, marketing and sales emails, are very bland and impersonal, and I'm seeing it now. Actually, this is probably an AI trend. I'm seeing it now when people pitch to my podcast and they say, "Oh, um, what's a typical one? Great job on your podcast. You're telling stories that need to be
Yeah,
told." And I thought, well,
yeah,
you obviously haven't listened to it. This is obviously a
yeah.
templated thing, and I
Yeah.
think that lacks that human connection. So
But
really,
isn't this the great irony that the part of the promise and hope of technology and AI is greater personalization?
hmm,
And I see the same thing as you. I mean, it's just not happening at all. I think some companies think if you slap somebody's name on an email, then it's it's personal. That's personalization. Well, maybe you might think that's personalization, but that is not personal. And the great irony of our day is, this is the promise, this is the hope. And what people think is personalization has become impersonal. When I see my name slapped on an email, that's almost like a signal to ignore it.
Yeah.
When that first sentence, which says, "Oh, here's that template," delete.
Yeah. And I mean, I have templates that I use in some of my processes, but it's about efficiency. But I generally am very sparse about using them. And I am using AI now to say, well, here's the template and here's the conversation I've had with that person that I want to follow up on. Change that template up so it actually sounds like I'm responding. And that's, to me, that's kind of taking my process of that step, which involves the template, that saves me a lot of time, but it's adding a little bit of personalization back without making it a manual process where I get involved in every response.
Made me think of something that in some ways, like AI is beginning to like dictate the agenda in some ways. So like I teach two classes online, one on personal branding and one on professional speaking. And so I'm on this training program called Maven. And so they're helping me, quote unquote, by sending out emails on my behalf to potential students or even current students, and I can't turn it off. So, I mean, it's like the automation has like taken over. I can't even be personal when I want to.
Yeah.
It's like I hadn't thought about that until you just mentioned it.
Yes, is a risk with some of these tools. You've just reminded me, you created a Mark bot to scale your mentorship and touch the world. So that's an AI replica, I guess, of your voice and your information. At the same time, of course, you're arguing that AI creates that illusion of feeling, that it actually is just a robot that lacks empathy, and that the true human feeling is our big competitive advantage, the curiosity and creating art. Now, as someone that champions the human brand, I imagine that you struggled with that idea of the Markbot and actually using that. So what are some of the conceptual boundaries you built for yourself in that, and how do you see that evolving?
Well, yeah. So the way the idea really started was I received an email from a friend, and the subject line of the email was, "This will incur your wrath." And what he had done was he began uploading my public content into a custom GPT. And he was trying to create a bot like me that would become one of his business advisors. So he was creating bots of different business gurus based on their public information and their personas. And it was really quite detailed. And he tested it out. And of course, I mean, he was careful about not uploading a lot of my, copyrighted material. And so, but at first I was just kind of aghast that it's like, okay, I feel humbled and honored when someone uses a quote of mine in an article. But this is sort of like hijacking my entire intellectual presence. And so I sort of rejected it at first. I didn't like it at first. But then I thought, and really it came as a result of writing this new book, because at the end of the book, I talk about, look, we're all going to go through this period of depression and anxiety as AI nips at the heels of our skill sets and perhaps our careers. But how can we reimagine ourselves and use AI to be bigger and more impactful and more creative? And one of the struggles I've always had is that at this stage in my life, teaching and mentoring is very important to me. But it's such a personal activity. It's such a one-on-one activity. And I thought, could I use AI to touch more people and maybe just give them advice that will help them in this day? So the irony of this is it's not just trained on my content. It's also trained on my values. It's trained on my ethics. It's trained on my tone. I wanted it to be encouraging. One of its directions is I want people to feel seen and heard. And one of the things it's supposed to, like, not just give you an answer, but ask more questions, like a real friend trying to help you. And we're at the point now where I think almost 1,000 people have used it. And the feedback has been very, very good. And one young woman wrote me back and she said, I started asking it business questions, and that was very good and that was very helpful. But then I felt it was like you, and I started asking it like personal questions to ask me to help me in my life. And at the end of one of its answers, it says, "It sounds like you need a hug." And she said, it sounded like you, and it made me want to cry because it was so much like you. So is that good, Jürgen? Is it good? I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a plan. I don't. It's just an experiment to see if maybe I can send ripples of positivity through the world that might help somebody. It's like, can it be positivity at scale? That's the idea. I don't know. There's no business value behind it. There's no, I don't see who's using it. I don't see what questions they're asking. There's no revenue model. It's just 100% an experiment in positivity.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story, and interesting that it's almost mimicking empathy in some ways with the response in that example you gave.
Sad. Yeah, it makes me sad because it's an illusion. It doesn't really care. It's a mathematical formula with a little bit of guidance from me, I guess. But maybe sometimes that's enough. If we have so much loneliness and so much isolation in the world, and maybe sometimes the illusion of empathy, maybe that's better than nothing.
Yeah. What I find also that it could enhance kind of our experiences is asking it to give me feedback on my style. So for example, I've given AIs a bunch of articles that I've written or blog posts or podcast recordings, and I ask it to critique what I've done on the podcast, and that's been quite interesting. It's uncovered things that I wasn't aware of, and in some ways, it's almost like a business coach that listens in. So I can upload the transcripts, I can upload the recordings, and I can say, what could I change here to be more impactful? What could I have done better? What questions could I ask that could have taken this conversation deeper or in a different direction? And the self-awareness that comes out of that is a lot better than if I listen back to the recording myself just as a listener and make some notes. So I think there's a lot of value in doing that. And what I do, similar to what you did in the MarkBot, I have a series of custom GPT set up for myself for my own use, and that in there is my values, what I see as my mission, and a bunch of other personal information about me that kind of it can use then as a guidepost.
Yeah. I love that, and I've used AI sort of as a guide in that way as well. And again, you have to tell it to like take off the gloves and really, give you feedback. I did that. I've done that for my books. I've done that for a lot of my writing. Just sort of, I guess, an inside secret I haven't talked about is there's a human editor that I've used for, I think, the last 4 or 5 of my books. And the reason I love her is because she's so mean. And she's absolutely fearless. She doesn't care about, my feelings, and she'll just tear it apart. And it has made my books so much better. Well, on this new book that we're talking about today, she was not available. I needed to get this book out, sort of rapidly, and she was not available. So I used AI as my editor, of course, guiding it to be mean, be mean like this other person. And I would say it was 80% good. The role that it played that was good is that it really was mean. It was so mean. At times I thought, this is too much. Look, just tell me something good right now, because you're being so mean to me. I can't take it anymore. But the bad part was, and the 20% that was missing, it couldn't really look at the whole narrative. It couldn't really say, oh, look, you said something in chapter 1 that you seem to contradict that in chapter 6. Now, that's something that the human editor could do. But that's something AI, it couldn't really look at the flow, at really the power of the entire narrative and connect the dots in that way. It could look at a paragraph, it could look at a chapter, it could look at an idea, but it couldn't really help me with the whole flow of the book. So, I think, for me, I definitely need to keep a human in the process.
That's fascinating, because one of the applications I use personally and sometimes for business as well from the AI is a recording app. So I can record random thoughts. This is what happened today. This is what we did. And then actually before that happened, this happened. So it's kind of like jumping all over the place. I record that, it transcribes it, and then there's an AI built into the back of that can actually turn that into a proper narrative. So it takes the bit where I say, oh, and I forgot this thing. It'll take that and it'll put that in its place and it'll get the flow right. But
great.
That's generally for just short things. I'm not sure that it would be suitable for books or, multi-chapter articles. But it's interesting that it doesn't pick up on that overall flow and any contradictions in the big picture.
Mm-hmm. I use an app like that for my podcasts. I've done a very poor job providing transcripts for my podcasts, and the reason is that in a podcast you might have, you might have sarcasm, you might have a joke, you might laugh or something, and that it just doesn't come through correctly on a transcript. So I felt like I would have to put so much editing into a transcript that it just was too much effort. But things have been getting better and better. And now there's this app called Cast Magic where you could just take the audio and say, create a blog post in the voice of Mark Schaefer with the highlights of this show. And it does about a 90%, 90, even maybe 95% good job. And I'm picky, I'm a writer. I'm very picky, but this has done a much better job. And so it's allowing me to do a better job for my listeners. I mean, some people, they're interested in the topic of the podcast, but they don't like listening to a podcast. They'd rather read it. And so AI is helping me in that way.
Yeah. Cast Magic's a brilliant app. I use it
Very
quite a
good.
bit, and I've even used it. I'm in a community that does some trading, and the guy who runs the community does a daily YouTube video. I mean, he's very prolific, and some of his videos go for 2 hours when he talks about stuff. And there's a lot of learning in there. There's a lot of subtle things, and you only really pick it up the more you listen to him. And I sort of decided I can't spend 2 hours a day listening to this guy's videos, even though they're hugely valuable. So I put them in Cast Magic, and I've built a custom sort of summary that pulls it all together,
brilliant.
pulls out the salient points, and it takes me about 2 minutes to just put the link in Cast Magic, and then 5 to 10 minutes of reading. And then I've got the learnings.
Yeah. I have a community as well. One of the things that we're using, which is just so amazing, and I don't know, I'm not in charge of this, so I don't know how they're doing it, but somehow they're using Notebook LM to summarize all the content in the community for a week and create a 15-minute audio podcast highlighting the content for the entire week. And it'll even talk about, well, Mark Schaefer brought up this point, and so brought up another point that sort of disagreed with that. And it's just when you're on vacation or you're tuned out, you can listen to that in 15 minutes and catch up with anything. It's just what a brilliant application for AI.
Yeah, well, there's lots of great ideas there that we've covered, and I like that we've actually gone into the positive direction here, even though we started off with the fears and the things, although there's a lot that we don't know and we need to come back and revisit. All right, well, I think this has been absolutely fabulous. I know you're on a time thing, so I think it's a good point to move on quickly to our buzz round. I don't think we did this one with you last time you were here, and it is about AI.
I'm terrible at these.
No, you'll be fantastic.
I'm not fast. I'm not fast on my feet, Jürgen. All right, go ahead. Let's go.
First one is around innovation. So what's the most innovative way you've seen AI used to strengthen human relationships?
Probably that audio summary that we talked about, because it's not just a blank summary. It actually elevates the people in the community that are contributing to the community. It's almost like a little 15-minute award ceremony every week. Ooh, did I make it into the podcast?
Yeah, that's great. I love it. And there's a bit of a gamification there as well, isn't there? Yeah. It probably encourages contribution to the community, which is a big challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thinking about your own experience, what's the best thing you've done to integrate AI in a way that enhances human connection?
This human connection. I can't say the Mark bot because, again, I don't really know who's using it. How am I using AI to enhance human connection? I'll have to pass on that one. I'm embarrassed to say. And the theme of all my writing is the most human company wins. So I'm embarrassed that I can't. See, I told you I'm terrible at this. I'm a writer, Jürgen. I'm a
Yeah,
writer. I need things to like percolate over time. All right, go ahead. I failed on that one.
excellent. Oh, well, that's fine. The last one is, I often ask, how can we differentiate ourselves by leveraging AI? But I think probably the deeper question here is, what's the critical skill we need to be cultivating, developing, expanding on in this age of AI?
I think it's this idea that we talked about, really, truly, curiosity. So, I am so blessed and happy. I have my first grandchild. He's such a
Oh,
beautiful little boy,
congratulations.
and he's 6 months old. And I just look at this child and I think, you know, kiddo, what kind of a world are you coming into? Who knows what this is going to be like? And I told my daughter and her husband, I said, I have some parenting advice for you. And you could see them like pucker up. And I said, I just finished writing this book. And one of the things I learned is really the essential importance of curiosity. We just have to embed a sense of curiosity in this child. And then they unpuckered and they relaxed and they realized that it really is good advice. And both my daughter and my son-in-law are extremely curious people. I mean, he's not even 6 months old and he's already been to an aquarium, a zoo, and a hike in the woods.
Yeah,
So we're off to a good start
wonderful.
with this
Yeah.
boy. But I think it's really instilling a sense of curiosity. That's going to be the survival skill in the world of AI.
Mm, love it. Yeah. And I think curiosity is something that has always been a big differentiator for people that are curious, more curious, seem to have achieved more, I think. So I think it's not so we don't have to develop anything new. We just have to make sure that that curiosity is enhanced. Although I see some people that seem to miss it. I
Yeah, I
know
don't.
my
It's an interesting idea that I don't. Can curiosity be learned? I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, it's
I don't know.
fascinating. My father turns 97 years old today, and every conversation I have with him, he comes up with, why is that like that? Or
Yeah.
what's the reason for this? Oh, I feel embarrassed because I thought I've never even thought about asking that question. So he still has that curious drive to learn more stuff.
Good. Great.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Well, does he use AI?
No, not as far as I know.
Yes.
Yeah. Although he's seen me use it, like he's asked questions. Well, I don't know to that, but we can find out real quick. So
Yeah.
I'll ask
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah. That's
Oh.
great.
Hmm. All right. Well, thanks, Mark. This has been another fabulous conversation as always, and I'm really curious to find out what we might be talking about in 12 months' time. I'll certainly put that on the calendar and see if we can make that happen again. Although I'm guessing you probably have a book out before then, and you may want to talk to us about
I
the
don't
new book.
know. I don't know. I don't know. I have no plan. Let's put it that way. But I literally, I write the book when I get curious. Like when I
Yeah.
see something happening in the world, um, that I just don't understand, and I get curious. I thought, well, if I could figure this out, it would make a great book.
Excellent. Well, tell us where people can find out more about the book and where they can reach out to you and maybe even say thanks for what you've shared with us today.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being so kind to have me join you again. And we always have great conversations. You're always so well prepared. Maybe AI helped prepare you. I don't know. I'm not going to judge. You do a good job. You do a good job. So you can find everything about me at Businesses Grow. You don't have to remember how to spell Schaefer. If you can remember Businesses Grow, you can find my blog, you can find my social media connections, and the book we talked about today was How AI Changes Your Customers. I'd love for you to check it out. I'm very proud of the book.
Excellent. Yeah, and it really is thought provoking and insightful. Lots of great examples and still asks a lot of questions. So I think it'll inspire curiosity. All right. So before we wrap up, what's an action you hope our listeners will take after hearing our conversation today, apart from checking out the book? Something that would make you feel like our time was really worthwhile together, beyond just because we both enjoyed the conversation and came up with some interesting, curious points.
I think part of the culture of leadership is to delegate. Leaders usually aren't doers. And what I would recommend is that to really understand what's going on today, you got to roll up your sleeves, and these new AI platforms, you've got to try it. You've got to dabble. You've got to dig into these things. To be a great leader, you don't need to have all the right answers. It's impossible to be an expert in everything, but you do need to have the right questions. And the only way to know how to ask those questions is to know what's possible with these AI platforms. So don't be afraid. Roll up your sleeves, try all these things that you've been hearing about and learn what's possible, and you'll be a better leader for it.
Yeah, great advice. It's I think that's something that I find for people that I'm not interested, or it's taking away something, or I'm afraid it might take my job or so on, that loses that ability to lead and to really understand, well, what is happening and what can I do to make this worthwhile and enhance my own thinking and enhance my contributions to the world.
Thank you, Jürgen. Thanks for having me today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. All the best for the future, and we'll be in touch about that next review of where we've come.